Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. We have a phenomenal game to go over as TCU goes on the road and plays the most surprising team of the 2022 college football season in the Kansas Jayhawks in Lawrence, Kansas. Game day is coming. What Coach Leipold has done with this Kansas Jayhawks team is just so impressive. And the rebuild, I really hope he's able to stay a couple more years. I know Wisconsin, I know Nebraska, they might want to capitalize and go get Coach Leipold for their own program. But what he's doing with it, he hasn't even finished this rebuild yet. Like they still have a lot of holes in their roster, but how this offense looks and how tough their defense is, I don't think their defense is getting enough credit for how good they are. I mean, this is a very exciting team, and they're going up against a TCU team that I think is a bona fide top 15 team in the country. TCU team that can hurt you in so many different ways. Before we get into it, though, just wanted to say thank you guys for all the support you guys have shown the channel. We're almost at 2,000 subscribers, which is absolutely incredible, and that is thanks to all the support you guys have shown. So if you do like the content, consider subscribing, like the video, comment below what you think this game will play out as. This is the most fun I have with this is talking to you guys in the comment section, learning about your guys' teams, learning about how you see these college football games. The support you guys have shown really does mean a lot. Let's get into it. I want to talk about this Kansas Jayhawks team first just because of how surprised – I think you knew this team was going to be better than they were last year. They started showing some strides under Jalen Daniels at quarterback. I didn't think they'd be 5-0. I didn't think they'd be a top 25 team heading into Week 6. Here we are, 5-0 against the spread. It starts with Jalen Daniels. He's a quarterback that just can do so much for this Kansas Jayhawks team, and he's been a really efficient passer. They're not asking him to throw the ball all around. He's completed 68% of his throws, 11 touchdowns, only 1 interception. Probably the least talented part of this Kansas team is their wide receivers, but they're getting some action from this passing game. But the damage they do is on the ground. Devin Neal is one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. He's averaging 6.8 yards per carry. Jalen Daniels averaging 7.3 yards per carry. Daniel Hedgeshaw, I think I said his name right. He's also been extremely impressive, averaging, 6 yards per carry. 7 Morrison, also 9.2 yards per carry. Like, this rushing attack is extremely impressive. And what they do is they're not playing power football. They're not getting behind a really big offensive line and getting downhill. What they're really good at doing is scheming up this offense where they get some of these phenomenal athletes, Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal, Daniel Hedgeshaw Jr., in space against bigger, slower not defensive linemen, but linebackers, less athletic defensive players than the athletes at the running back spot. And they're just making them miss in the open space and really explosive run game. This is a team that methodically marches the ball down the field. They consistently stay on schedule, and they put up a lot of points. And one thing I really like about what you saw from this Kansas team is they were able to win kind of an ugly one at home against Iowa State. Iowa State's a team that is very tough. Matt Campbell has done a great job rebuilding that program, similar to what we're seeing Coach Leipold do. And anytime Iowa State comes to town, it's going to be a tough game. And Kansas was able to win kind of an ugly one, which is important when you want to build a program, when you want to win 9-10 games. You have to be able to win some of those ugly, sloppy games. And Kansas did that. We saw them really struggle on offense for the first time all year. Really couldn't get much on the ground. Jalen Daniels only completed 7 balls, I think, all Saturday. They were able to pull it out, force some turnovers, play some good defense in the red zone. And again, that's what's most impressive is they won when it wasn't easy. They won when they weren't really able to play their game. Their game is more, we're going to score more points than you. We're going to get that offense going. And they were able to win kind of an ugly one. This TCU team, they're both TCU 4-0 against the spread. We've made a lot of money off TCU, and I'm not itching to bet this one as TCU is 7-point favorites on the road in Lawrence, Kansas. But I do think this TCU team is a little bit more complete. We noted Coach Leipold is not done finishing this rebuild for Kansas. They still have a lot of holes in their depth chart, in their personnel, and their roster. This TCU team I do think is a little bit more complete. Starting on the offense side of the ball for TCU, Max Duggan, I didn't think he should have been the starting quarterback, and he actually wasn't the starting quarterback to start the season. Chandler Morris got the nod. But Max Duggan, what we've seen from him is he's just a gamer. Even under Coach Patterson, who was such a good coach for TCU for so long, but this offense was just so poor last year. But you look at this offense, they have a good offensive line. They have really, really good skill position players. And Coach Patterson just wasn't getting the most out of those guys. This year, they really are. And Max Duggan, I think, complements this offense really well. Yes, Sonny Dykes wants to throw the ball around, but they also run the ball extremely effective. And Max Duggan is a large part of that. You take a look at what he's been able to do: 6.5 yards per carry, 149 yards total. He's hit some really explosive plays. He's a guy that can extend plays on third and long, let his wide receivers get open. And he's a good enough passer. I wouldn't say Max Duggan is one of the best passing quarterbacks in the Big 12, although he has completed 75% of his throws for almost 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So I might just be wrong about that, but Max Duggan is just one of those quarterbacks that it doesn't always look pretty, although it does look pretty for TCU most of the year. He's more of a guy that he's just going to move the sticks. He's going to use his feet. He's a very tough quarterback. He's built up. I really like Max Duggan. And what I want to talk about is I don't even think they've really reached their full potential. Kendre Miller, Amari DiMaccardo, really, really good running backs, both averaging 7.6 yards per carry. Kendre Miller is a guy that if he gets to the second level, he's making linebackers miss and he's hitting a big play. I thought this running back room would be a lot worse with the departure of Zach Evans. I was very wrong because this TCU offense looks phenomenal running the football. What I want to talk about a little bit more is that passing game. You take a look at who's been doing the damage for them. Tay Barber's their leading receiver with 11 catches for 208 yards. Darius Davis is a guy that just elite speed, almost hit 24 miles per hour in that SMU game. Not sure if you saw that clip. He's a guy that if you get him the ball in space, he can make defenders look silly with the angles they take because he's got legit burners. One of the fastest players in the whole entire country, very good in special teams. But Quinn Johnson, he's been relatively pedestrian to start the season, only 12 catches for 114 yards. He's a guy that is, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in the country. He hasn't looked at this year, but he's a guy that can go up vertically and make catches over people. We haven't really seen that out of Quentin Johnson yet. And that's kind of what I'm most excited about for this TCU team is what if they unlock Quentin Johnson as one of the best wide receivers in the country and start using him more like that? I'm not trying to critique what Sonny Dykes has done with this offense because it's clearly working, averaging 48.5 points per game. But Quinn Johnson is a guy that they haven't really tapped into yet. And if they tap into him in some big moments, I think he's a guy that can really be a difference maker in this offense. TCU is going to score points. Kansas, I think, will score points, but I really do like how this TCU defense matches up against this Kansas Jayhawks team. We saw Iowa State give Kansas trouble on the offense side of the ball with that 3-3-5 look. Having more athletes. What we talked about Kansas, they like to get their running backs in mismatches in space against linebackers, against defensive ends. And Devin Neal's going to win that matchup every time. When you have a little bit more speed on the outside, that Kansas Jayhawks offense, I think, struggles a little bit more. Because, again, they're not taking advantage of that three-man front and getting downhill on you and kind of just busting out 6 yards per carry. They're looking for those explosive plays. Iowa State was able to limit that with the more speed, the more athleticism that they have on the defense side of the ball. Kansas or TCU is going to run a very, very similar defensive look, but I even like their linebackers a little bit more. You take a look at what they have. Johnny Hodges, the transfer from the Navy, he's a tackle machine, 25 tackles on the year, 3 for a loss. D. Winters, I think, is one of the best linebackers in the Big 12. He's got 5 tackles for a loss and 19 tackles. I really like Marcel Brooks. I really like Jamoy Hodge. They have linebackers who are very good in space and they're very good at tackling in space. And that is what Kansas kind of tries to do to defense. They're going to try to get their running backs in space and hope that their running backs can make your defenders miss in space. I think they're going to struggle a little bit with that with TCU. One other thing I want to note is I think you're going to see loaded boxes from TCU. They have really, really good cornerbacks. Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, one of the best cornerbacks in the whole entire country. I think they're going to play a lot of single high safety, a lot of press man coverage, and they're going to say, hey, if Jalen Daniels can beat you with those wide receivers against a very, very good secondary, so be it. But they're not going to let this run game beat you. I think TCU has the edge here simply because of the more complete team. This Kansas Jayhawks defense is not horrible. They've given up 384 yards per game, but I just think TCU's defense is a little bit better. I think TCU is a little bit less one-dimensional on the offense side of the ball. This Kansas Jayhawks team we saw against Iowa State, if they can't run the ball, they're struggling to put up points. They only put up 14 points against Iowa State, and they really couldn't run the football. If TCU can kind of shut down that run game, force Jalen Daniels to make some throws from the pocket, I think that can pose some issues from Kansas. So getting into our pick, I do think it'll be a track meet. I do think both teams will put up points. 67.5 on the over-unders, a little bit hard to stomach taking the over. My lean is TCU with the points to cover 7. I liked it a lot more at 6.5, but when you look at what team has a little bit more talent, what team has a little bit more speed, although speed might be a little bit more of a question, I think this TCU team is a little bit more complete. But again, this is not a game that I'm rushing to the counter to bet because this Kansas Jayhawks team has covered every single game they have played. Every time we're one-on-one betting Kansas. I faded them against Iowa State, thought Iowa State would be able to give them some trouble, which they did, but they weren't able to score any points on Kansas. I think TCU is going to be able to give Kansas kind of those same troubles, but I think this TCU team is just explosive enough on offense where they'll be able to score 35 points. Now, can Kansas Jayhawks score 28 points? That is a little bit more of a question. I don't think so. So I'm leaning TCU just with so much. I mean, you look at this TCU offense, they have so many places they can hurt you with Brock going down for Iowa State in last week's game. I mean, there just wasn't that many guys on this Iowa State team that could really hurt Kansas outside of Xavier Hutchinson. This TCU team has a laundry list of running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks that can hurt you with their athleticism. I'm riding TCU -7 here. I don't feel great about this pick, but it is going to be it's going to be such a fun game to watch. I cannot wait to see. I'm not saying are we going to find a little bit more out about Kansas. No, we found out about Kansas. They are for real. This TCU team, though, is also for real with a very, very impressive win where they just blow out Oklahoma at home. Taking TCU, I think they're a legit contender to win the Big 12. I really, really like how complete this team is on both sides of the ball. Give me TCU -7. Don't feel great about it, but this game is going to be a blast to watch. That'll do it from the boys. Again, if you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys, and we will talk to you guys later.